I wanted to mention this comment here about prototype timing. Now listen carefully. According to chronology in the Bible, Adam is about 7,000 years old, according to the chronology in the Bible. Now the earth may be much older than that. We don't know. It could be a billion years, million, whatever they want to talk about, 6 million, whatever they want to say. We don't know that. But based on the biblical chronology, mankind is about 7,000 years old. So when Adam disobeyed God in the 3rd chapter of Genesis, God made a promise in the same chapter. He says that the woman shall have a seed that shall come into the world and shall crush the head of the authority of Satan, and then shall restore man back. Well, here's a question I had about God, or with God, for years. God, why did you take so long to send the seed? Between Adam and Jesus is 4,000 years. That's a long wait. And I kept asking God, why didn't you send Jesus in chapter 4? Solve the problem. That's a logical question, isn't it? Or why didn't you send Jesus during the time of Abraham, or the time of Moses, or the time of, the Chaldeans or the Assyrians? Why didn't you send Moses during the time of Belshazzar, or send Moses during the time of Jesus? Why didn't you send Jesus, during the time of David? Why didn't you send your son during the time of Nebuchadnezzar? Come on, Jesus, just come. And God said to me an amazing thing. He said, I sent my son, this is his answer, in the fullness of time. Now the word fullness here has nothing to do with a watch, on your hand, a time of day or something. The word fullness of time means everything was in its right place. The setting was perfect. God will always move when he has everything in the right place. So, why did God wait 4,000 years before he sent the Messiah? Because it took 4,000 years for there to be a prototype in the earth that was the correct prototype of the kingdom of God. Now listen carefully, because it's going to help you. To understand God's timing in sending the king, the Messiah, anointed king, you have to understand his concept of a kingdom. And there was no kingdom on earth that had all the components in it until the Romans arrived. The Romans actually set up a prototype of a kingdom that was the closest to God's kingdom. And that's why he came at that time. Now, let me make a statement. Please buy this CD and think about it. Listen to it a few times. Here's the statement. Effective communication depends on correct concepts. So when you're going to communicate with someone, you got to make sure that their concepts are the same as yours. Otherwise, there will be a misconception. So every time you use words, the meaning's got to be the same in both persons' minds. Are you with me? So when God is about to speak into the world, he has to make sure that the words that are going to be used by him are common in the environment. So the Roman Empire had all the words, all the concepts that a kingdom that God desired on earth had. Let me give you an example. Every kingdom before the Romans, all of them, you can study them, whenever a kingdom took over territory or invaded foreign territory, here's what they did. They would kill all the strong soldiers. They would take the women and then take all the young men, and they would uproot them out of the country that they invaded and take them back to their country and make them slaves. You know that. All through scriptures, that's what they did. They would displace people. The Romans were the first kingdom in history that reversed that. The Romans was the first kingdom, and that's why they were so successful. They were the most powerful kingdom in history. They were the longest reigning kingdom in history. Even today, no one has ever passed the Romans in rulership. And thirdly, the Romans had the largest kingdom in history and still do. They reigned from Africa to Scotland. They controlled the world for 200 years. They were the most powerful, most successful kingdom in history. Why? Because they used God's system. What is God's system? The Romans were the first ones to invent God's old idea of colonization. What did the Romans do? Whenever they invaded a foreign territory, they didn't uproot the people. They would leave the people in the land, but the king, Caesar, which means, it's the word for Lord, he would send from his courts a person that he handpicked to that territory where he just invaded, and that person would be called a tetrarch or a governor. Pilate was one of them. There are many of them. And they would live in the new territory with the people that they conquered, and the job of that governor was to convert that territory into Rome. In other words, the Romans didn't bring the people to Rome to make them Romans. They took Rome to the people to make the people Rome. Please listen to me, please. So the concept, when God saw it, God said, that's it, let's go now. Because everything you're going to say will make sense to them. And that's why the Romans were so successful. They used God's system. And so came the saying, when in Rome, you do as the Romans do. In other words, wherever the Romans invaded became little Rome. They made you speak Latin. They made you eat Roman food. They made you wear Roman clothing. They made you pay Roman taxes. They made you eat Roman culture. In other words, everything became Rome. So that wherever you are, it's Rome. And Jesus came in the midst of that. He was born in a colony. Palestine was a colony. Judea, that whole area, was a colony, and the governor that was sent there to control it and make it Rome was Pilate.